Welcome to Startuprad.io, your podcast and YouTube blog covering the German startup scene with news, interviews, and live events.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Joe from Startuprad.io, your startup podcast and YouTube blog from Germany. If you're watching this, remember to like and subscribe down here. If you haven't already, today I'm bringing you the first interview of me ever with an art entrepreneur. I would like to welcome Mario. How you doing?
Good, Joe. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So I already spilled the news. You are an artpreneur. We will get there, what it means, but first, let's talk a little bit about your CV because I've been stalking you a little bit on LinkedIn, and as always, your LinkedIn profile will be available down here, meaning a link towards it, because you are working with art, and I thought, what I'm gonna find in your CV, and it turns out there's something like Danone, Philips, L'Oreal, and that's really not what I associate with an artist. How did this turn you into an entrepreneur, and what did those jobs teach you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of weird to look back at my background and see all these big names, big companies, and then look a bit forward and see that now I'm working with street artists. I mean, the reason, so to say, the reason why I ended up in those companies is because I ended up studying marketing and business, and I didn't know what to do. Just as simple as that. I was a bit lost in my life, and I wanted to get a job and go up the corporate ladder. And I had the chance to work for all these companies for a while. But you know, even before that, so let me just take it from the very beginning and rephrase all this. I come from an engineering family. My dad and all his brothers and sisters are engineers. So based on that background, I decided to study engineering as well, civil engineering. I had the chance to work for a big company in Boston, founded by MIT professors that do forensic engineering. I worked in a project after the World Trade Center tragedy happened. I moved to Boston and I worked there for a while in a very specific project related to that. And the experience was amazing. I was really loving it, but I didn't find myself as an engineer really, purely at least. And then I had the chance to go and take a small short course in business in Stanford University. And that kind of opened my eyes to a different world. Business gave me the opportunity, or studying business gave me the chance to open a bit my horizons and not be stuck on something as specific as engineering. So when I did that, I realized that I had opened a lot of doors into different business fields. I thought back then that my chances were best at, working up in the corporate ladder. I had grown up in an engineering family, but also in an entrepreneur's family. My dad also founded several companies throughout his life, and I always saw how he struggled almost on a month-to-month basis with stress, with things to do, with working the weekends, working long hours. And even though he was very passionate about it, I didn't want that for myself. I wanted to have a more chilled life from 9 to 5.
Let me rephrase that. So basically, you grew up in an engineering company. Your dad ran companies, and you studied engineering but didn't want to be an entrepreneur because of the stressfulness of it. And now you are and that leads us to you now being an entrepreneur working with artists. Can you tell us a little bit about how this happens and why you actually did it?
So when I had this experience in the corporate world, I was very dissatisfied because I thought my skills were not being used for a social or cultural purpose. And I wanted to do something about it. I met my co-founder, and she told me, "Hey, I was walking around Lisbon. I was living in Lisbon back then in Portugal, and she told me I was walking yesterday around the city and streets, and I wonder how they live. I wonder what kind of jobs they have, if they have enough money to live, if they live on the streets or not." And I told her, okay, let's just go tomorrow and talk to some of these guys. And that's how I started getting into the topic. We went out next day, talked to the guys, and tried to find out how we could help. So I didn't really get into the entrepreneurship topic as such as me thinking, hey, I want to start a company. What happened in my mind was more like I'm a bit dissatisfied with my jobs, and I want to have a social impact or a cultural impact. So that kind of brought curiosity, and that took me out on the streets in Lisbon to try to help out these guys. That's in a very grassroots way. That's how the idea started.
Just a little detour. My audience know I love detours. Many people are not familiar with Lisbon, and I was there once, and it was just beautiful. It's an amazing city with beautiful old houses, statues, Cristo Rey statue, and the Tejo, and wonderful hills, and all of that, directly at the ocean. What did you leave it, and what did you like about the city?
Like you say, the city is full of art and culture in general. It's a lot of history. Lisbon was, and Portugal in general, was one of the richest countries and reigns back then in like 500, 6 years ago. So you see a lot of richness, a lot of wealth around it. But of course, nowadays it's a very different economical situation, and people are more struggling than rather living la vida loca. So what I saw was this like need of entrepreneurship, and at the same time a really nice mix between culture, art, and living life outside on the streets, like living outdoorsy. It's a very outdoorsy country because the weather is nice, right? So you find a lot of street vendors, a lot of street artists. So that it makes it very dynamic. It makes it very lively. So it's a beautiful city to live in and to study. I had the chance to do my master's there, and I would recommend it to anyone that is looking to to live in a cool city.
Talking about cool city in Europe, you actually been living there, and you just got out and talked to the guys. Hey guys, how you doing? The street artist. How may I help you? Was that kind of how it started?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I was never into starting my own company because I saw my dad struggling, also having a lot of success, but a lot of times struggling. I didn't want to have that stress, so I didn't go out on the streets trying to see, oh, how can I make a business out of this guys. I'd rather thought, I want to use my business skills and my engineering skills to help out guys that are playing a guitar in the streets or guys that are painting the walls on the streets. And that's basically how we started. That kind of mentality is what got us out on the streets to talk to these guys. And what's funny, Joe, is that a lot of people found that very interesting and started talking about us and writing about us in the newspaper and inviting us to TV shows and stuff because the German blonde girl and the Colombian guy were talking to artists in the streets of Lisbon, which is it was a bit weird back then or a bit strange or different. And that's how the whole thing started. From there on, we started getting publicity. We started getting a bit of a name, a bit of a reputation of these guys want to help the arts. And step by step, companies started realizing, oh, these guys have very cool artists, and I wanna book these guys for my event or for my marketing campaign, because they work with underground artists that are not easily found. And that's how, step by step, in a very organic way, we started realizing, okay, there might be something here, there might be a business. Let's sit down and think about it. And yeah.
And how did you turn it first into a business? There are many, many more questions, but first, how did you turn it into a business?
The turning point as such is complicated to know, because, like I said, it was a very organic process. I think it was a big green flag when we started getting big brands wanting to get associated with our artists. So, we got, for example, Hard Rock Cafe wanting to talk to us because they had this big event and they wanted to have special things, special, unique, unseen, wonderful acts. Or we started talking to L'Oreal because of the same reasons. So that was like the first time when we say, okay, this can become a business. And from then on, we started realizing that I was not into the startup scene. I was not into entrepreneurship, like I said before. So we started getting connected to the local ecosystem in Lisbon. Back then, it was just starting. The startup scene was not as big as it is now, which is quite important, I would say. I mean, there's huge events happening in Lisbon related to startups nowadays. Back then, there was nothing, but there were some key players that helped us realize that we could make a business out of it, and what kind of business models we could try on in our idea.
My next question would be, how are you able to find the really interesting, important street artists? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and a lot of people wonder how you do that. For us, it's from the very beginning, we go out on the streets and try to hunt artists on the streets, whether it's a musician playing with their band, or a graffiti artist that had just recently painted a big mural, or any other kind of arts that can happen in public spaces. You can always hunt on the streets, especially in largely populated areas like big cities. There's a lot of stuff happening. So that's one thing. Another thing is that a lot of our artists that already know us, they recommend what we do. So we get a lot of incoming applications from artists wanting to be part of our platform. Those are the two main things. And then there's a third thing that we're trying more and more, and that is content creation for artists. So we understand very well what they need, and what they need to be connected to these big brands and big companies. And so we write content about it, and that's how they find us, through SEO, organic traffic on Google, maybe.
Mm-hmm. I would have one more question to brag a little bit about. What are some of the most interesting acts, actors, performances that are now on Book a Street Artist? I mean, there'll be a lot of people who can play the guitar. There will be some really awesome graffiti painters. But is there something you were actually surprised that they are working as a street artist?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a lot of stuff happening. I mean, of course, you could say it's a very niche sector, and it certainly is. But if you get to know a bit more about the scene, you get to see a lot of super cool stuff that artists are doing now with tech. So, for example, there are a lot of muralists, a lot of graffiti artists that are painting a wall, but on top of that wall, on a digital medium, they create sort of like a 3D animation of it. And then with an app, you can put that app in front of the wall of the mural on the street, and that wall would change, it would move. So it makes it dynamic. So street art becomes dynamic and digital at the same time. And you can interact with the wall, you can brand it if you're a company, and so on. So that on the one hand. Then at the same time, you have a lot of artists doing stuff with video mapping. So this is huge, complex live installations mapped out on a big facade that requires a lot of coding and computer work that are also fantastic for big marketing campaigns or film productions or big festivals in the middle of the city. And so
what I would have in mind right now for this would be something like Christmas decorations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are generally high budget projects, so they're normally more on the marketing budgets of companies rather than on let's say on a Christmas event for their employees or something like that. But definitely.
But I would assume everybody who wants to throw a very fancy party, a very fancy corporate Christmas party, they can of course have a look at your website, right?
Absolutely. I mean, this is. I mean, one of our best months is October, November, when Christmas is approaching. A lot of companies, especially here in Berlin, we have a lot of clients like Zalando and stuff where they throw big events, and they want to have the coolest, non-seen, underground artists, and so they approach us, and we do the job.
At first, I thought you guys are something like a platform where you take some of the margin or a fee for like connecting the street artist and the potential client, but you are also working like a creative agency for corporate clients?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, we on the one hand, we let's say the market is full of mediators between artists and clients, so like bookers. What we do is we take this agency model and we modernize it with tech. So we put tech behind to make the processes for both the artists and the clients much simpler, to match them better, and to help the artists again to become a bit more autonomous without the need of someone there, a booker, for example, always being there behind trying to get them booked. But a lot of times, depending on the budget, things become less or more automated. So we do have the platform where you can sort of go and sort of like book an artist yourself. But when it comes to having a huge budget of 100 to 100K, where they need 7 live video mapping artists for a big campaign or something like that, then that doesn't happen on the platform as such. Even though behind the processes that we use in the more agency side of the business is full of tech, and it's full of processes that are optimized based on what we do on the platform already.
And as we said at the beginning, down here in the show notes, you guys can actually reach out to book a street artist. There's the company website for all the artists out there, for all the people who want to book it, and for, of course, everybody with a big marketing budget as well. Let's get a little bit down to business, how you guys are actually making money.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Like I said, our sweet spot is our helping companies to utilize those marketing budgets in a more creative and interactive way. So we help them create experiences with artists and creatives, be it in events or even out of home advertising. So we charge a fee for that. We generally charge a commission. It goes with anything between 10 to 30%. And that's our business model, basically. So on the booking platform, on the book yourself kind of platform, we charge anything from 10 to 20%. And then for bigger projects, depending on how involved is our team, we also take a commission from anything between 10 to 30%.
And I do understand you guys been more or less started in Lisbon. How did you end up in Berlin?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I should have stayed there with the sun and the beach and the ocean and the good food.
So sorry, you just surprised me with the answer.
Sometimes I'm like, sometimes I also wonder why. I mean, I had a very nice life next to the ocean, next to the beach, going running in the beach every second day and eating nice fish. And now I live in Kreuzberg. So it's full of, well, I don't want to say it, but full of party people. And you wake up and everything is kind of dirty. But Berlin has a super vibrant artsy scene, and I would even say I would go as far as saying that Berlin is the capital of contemporary art and culture in the world right now, at least in the Western world. And so it's like a melting pot for artists. It's a lot of artists coming here to get inspired, to experiment. The environment is just so open and so creative that people are not fearful of doing crazy stuff here. So for us, that's on the one hand super interesting because our supply needs to be as crazy as Berlin. Um, And then on the other hand, we got into an accelerator program here called Axel Springer Plug and Play. It used to be Axel Springer Plug and Play. They changed the name recently, and they invested in us back in end of 2015, and that's also a big reason why we decided to move to Germany.
Okay, and we like to point out also like the hidden gems, the very special places people don't know because we have a global audience of like 250,000 subscribers right now. Can you give us a hint of like one, two, or maybe even more places that actually do have a very great artist scene that are like hidden gems nobody has on the screen? Because if you're talking like artists and basically Europe, you'll have in mind Paris, Berlin, London, Lisbon, maybe Madrid, maybe Barcelona, but then that's the end of my horizon. Who else is there you would like to point out, give a big shout out, mental high five?
Wow, that's a good question. It's, I mean, you have the typical Paris and London. Of course, they're big players as well. Barcelona, like you said, amazing. Lisbon, fantastic city for arts, especially urban art. Um, I think some Italian cities as well. Interesting enough, there's a lot of cities in the north of Europe. I had the chance to be in Boda and Oulu, those are Finnish and Norwegian cities, and they have, even though the cities are quite small, they have some nice, especially graffiti festivals happening every now and then. And it's very dynamic and very active in the scene. Yeah, that's that. I mean, from what I understand, there's street art happening everywhere. I mean, it's sometimes even for us it's hard to catch up because there's so many new things popping up every second day. There's a lot of cities also in the Netherlands with really cool stuff. Belgium, amazing street art as well. Some of the biggest street artists come from Belgium and the Netherlands, for example. So, yeah. In Europe, you have a lot of cool stuff. In the US as well. I don't know much the scene, but of course, New York City, it's a lot of cities in California as well. No, of course, if you go down to Florida, Miami area, Wynwood, that's also sort of like a mecca for urban art. So, yeah.
I would never had Finland or Norway on my list, but I'll have right now. Just a little bit on a closing note, because for our audience, we're recording now approximately half an hour. I would like to ask you, like, how are you guys financed? Are you currently looking for investors?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have some investors on board. They helped us build the technology so far. And last year, Joe, we decided to say, okay, let's try to be profitable. Let's try to support ourselves with our own revenue, and so far we managed to do so. So we fund ourselves with our own revenue. But we're always open to welcoming new partners, especially if they're strategic partners that bring something to the table other than only money. So when you ask me if I'm looking for investors, I would generally say yes, we're always open to it, and we're not crying for money. Fortunately, thanks to our structure of the business as such, because we can pay the bills. But of course, we welcome money for growth, especially into other markets, and we also welcome money if it's smart money.
I was wondering, which markets are you looking at to grow into? You just mentioned the United States.
Yes, like it's hard to say now because of what's happening. Oh, that sounds mean, but I don't know now if the United States would be the right market to go to. I find the US super interesting. Of course, I've lived there, I have friends there, I know the culture. I'm very familiar with it and so on. But what I find also very interesting is Asia and what's happening there in terms of urban art, because a lot of this, what used to be closed to the arts in general, all these institutions are opening up a bit more and are understanding that urban art is what the young people want to consume. They don't want to consume museum art. And so China, of course, being a huge market, is a very, very appealing next expansion plan for us. So that would be interesting. Not only China, other countries in Asia, but China, of course, would be the more interesting one.
A lot of information. I learned a lot of new stuff. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciated. Everybody who would like to learn more, go down here in the show notes. As we said before, there'll be a link to your personal LinkedIn profile for everybody who wants to reach out personally to you, as well as your company website for everybody who either wants to have their office decorated by a fancy graffiti artist or throwing a really awesome Christmas party or something like that. Mario, it was just a pleasure having you here. Thank you very much. It was really, really great to have you here as a very different type of startup that I'm usually interviewing. Hope to come back. Hope to have you back in like 2 or 3 years, and we can talk about the art scene again.
Absolutely, Joe. Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure to have you, to be here with you. And yeah, big ups for your listeners, and one love, and keep supporting the artists.
That's all, folks. Find more news, streams, events, and interviews at www.startuprad.io. Remember, sharing is caring.